in general terms, always volunteer for every opportunity to get out. So there's several vehicles that the Center for Human Security leverages to ensure the campus is engaged in the community.
Welcome to Innovation Springs. I'm your host, Hayley Blackburn, Innovation and Design Librarian, Program Director in C3 Innovation, and affiliate faculty with the Center for Research Frontiers in Digital Humanities. Now, this show spotlights the folks doing cool things across education, research, business, and thought leadership.
Today's guest is part-time professor, director, and international consultant on matters of human security, which is a field that has evolved in ways that might surprise you.
You can find more information and notes about the show at c3innovation.uccs.edu. Let's dive into the spring.
Yeah, first, thanks, Hayley. Thanks for inviting me on. This is great. Look forward to talking a little about the Center for Human Security. So, Steve Recca, I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Human Security. I've been in that position since 2014, and I've been with UCCS since 2005. So, kind of an interesting background. I started as an adjunct faculty member in 2005, and then became the Deputy Director of the Center for Homeland Security, then became the Director of the Center for Homeland Security. Which started out of some work here on campus back in the early 2000s. And then took over, rebranded essentially, because looking at Homeland Security, that aperture is a little bit narrow. It was initially focused on terrorism, counterterrorism, that thought process following 9/11, not a surprise. But the notion was we wanted to get more of the campus engaged. Get more the kind of the human side of security and how we think about safety and just public engagement. So 2014 recreated it as a Center for Human Security, and the notion behind it is to create a human-centric approach to security. Right. So we tend to think in broad terms, all of us, I think, in security as I just came from a trip, so I spent some amount of time in a TSA line, and so we think of security in terms of the more painful aspects, or we think of it legitimately in terms of conflict, or the threats we have. But it's also, are we financially secure? Are we emotionally secure? What about our healthcare system? And so the alignment now with the College of Public Service is a perfect fit for the Center for Human Security, and work very closely with the three departments in the college, so social work, criminal justice, and public administration. So it turns out to be a very good fit. So
yeah, okay, wow. So you have kind of seen it evolve, and you've even seen our campus evolve a bit. How did you sort of get into that career field and end up kind of as the director of the center? Walk me through your career sort of track and progress.
Very good, yeah. So a bit of a diverse background, but the first part of my career was centered around more physical security. I was in the Navy for 21 years, and then I did some special projects around the Navy. I spent a lot of time in Europe, working with our NATO partners and working with our bilateral engagements partners there. But that taught me a lot about the general nature of international relations, working with other countries, working with partners, the value in building alliances and friendships. And then that evolved into, not a surprise, post 9/11 is we're going to think about security a little differently now. The United States had been under attack, a lot of social issues at the time. And so how do we think about security in 2001? Mm-hmm. And then it evolved from there. But my background was in, kind of the hard security aspect of how we think of security. So
okay, amazing. So you mentioned, of course, you're the director of the center, and then you also teach some classes. What is just a typical day in your life like? What was last Tuesday like for you?
Well, so first, the fun part is there is no typical day, which it can be, a little confusing, but it's a lot of fun too. So, roughly what a day in the life of. So, generally a lot of community engagement. So I am fortunate, and I know we'll probably get to this as well. I manage the Center for Human Security, but part of my duties also include developing and delivering the McConkey Leadership Conference. It's an annual conference, been going on for several years. In addition, working to support the Public Safety Initiative, which has been around since 2017. And both of those are very much community-centric. So working with the public administration part of the City of Colorado Springs, El Paso County, Southern Colorado, bringing those that work in public service. And again, that's law enforcement, fire, emergency services, emergency management, and then community engagement as well. So broadly thinking of just community activist pieces in Colorado Springs. So, a typical day. So I'm reaching out to the mayor's office to work with the McConkey Leadership Conference. I'm working with Jenna Hausman, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Children's Hospitals of Colorado, to talk to her about how to bring healthcare into the mix of human security in terms of the campus. Talking with faculty members on campus about how to integrate more human security into courses. There's no forcing function, but hey, here's some ideas you might want to think of this. And then more broadly, engagements with what's happening in the nation's capital, what's happening in allied and partner and nations around the world, really. How do they think about it? So I'm spending a lot more time with the Nordic countries and with Ukraine to understand their take on human security in a very demanding environment, in a very challenging environment. So a typical day is kind of a mix of all those things. So good question. I wish I had, at 8:30 I'm drinking coffee, but it really depends. So yeah.
Love it. Well, sometimes when our schedules are so sort of dynamic, flexible, it forces us to also be thoughtful, innovative, flexible kind of with the work that we're doing that I think can help us in a lot of other areas as well. So one thing that I wanted to circle back to you had mentioned, right, was just all the different stakeholders outside of our campus that you interact with and sort of interface and meet with. I know there's an effort, I think, for many people on campus to try and engage right beyond sort of our kind of borders. Do you have any kind of advice or thoughts on how like a faculty member could kind of get started building relationships beyond those that are on campus?
Yes, attend the McConkey Leadership Conference.
Yes, do it. We'll put the info in the description.
So we'll, so my first thought is, in general terms, always volunteer for every opportunity to get out. So there's several vehicles that the Center for Human Security leverages to ensure the campus is engaged in the community. We're represented on the board of the Colorado Springs World Affairs Council. So we do help with their events. We often facilitate discussions on topics of global affairs. We also, through the center, but the College of Public Service and the Political Science Department, host the International Visitors Leadership Program. And the Cybersecurity Center and Gretchen Bliss is also very much active in that space too. And so that idea of meeting the community in ways that they find useful and leveraging the great capabilities on campus. So thinking about not just the College of Public Service aspect, but what's psychology doing? What's Chip Benide in the center? He's doing some wonderful work with resilience, right? So it really engages the community on a very, very direct level. The engineering and the cybersecurity side, again, very much relevant to what we do in the community. So when you talk about what my faculty and staff and students do in this space, it's really about looking for opportunities that are there, but and I think they're plentiful. But if anybody needs a good idea, Ferry, on how to engage with the community, come to me.
Okay, you have the resources to help lead the path. I love it. So one of the big things with C3 innovation is creativity, curiosity, community. How can we sort of leverage those pillars to help folks sort of innovate and reach their dreams and their goals? How, kind of in your space, do you define innovation, and where do you tend to kind of find or define inspiration for the work that you do?
Yeah, let me tackle the second part first. Let me just get my thoughts here. But the inspiration and human security, just the human part, right, comes together naturally, I think. The idea is, how do you motivate me as an individual to be inspired, to be... So part of that is leadership, who we're talking to. So it's the chancellor who does a wonderful job kind of communicating with students, faculty, staff to engage and say, tough times, but we're in this together, right? So inspiring in that sense of, hey, we will get through this. But leadership generally. And the other is that the aspect I mentioned earlier about looking for opportunities to volunteer, always saying yes. I know it sounds crazy, and especially if you're a student or it's faculty and it's midterm grading time or staff, on the crunch time, I get it, but the notion of so many wonderful opportunities, jump in, that helps you be inspired. But it also leads to our way of just approaching innovation as an individual. So the notion of innovation to me is, it's almost easier to think about it in a technology context. I imagine most of the listeners here, those who will view on the YouTube channel, you've got a smartphone with you, right? So you're looking for that upgrade. You're looking for the next technology that will make your life simpler, smarter, more efficient. Whether it's artificial intelligence using to write your next paper, please don't do that, or not. But the idea of innovation and technology makes sense. In the human space, it strikes me as, again, part of that collective of the more experiences I have, the more people that I engage with that don't think like me, the more likely that I will see problems, challenges differently, or maybe they won't be problems and challenges anymore. So on a kind of an amorphous level, thinking about innovation in terms of being experienced, getting experience, growing in that space. And it has a lot to do with just connecting human to human.
Yeah.
And that was a big driver in my thought of Homeland Security is great. And I mean, it's a very valuable way of thinking about keeping our citizens, our families safe. But human security really drives it from the ground up, right? The notion of I'm responsible for my security, but I'm also thinking about, what about my neighbors, the ones that I haven't seen walk out their door for a while? Is anybody thinking about them in our busy lives, right? Or when we enter I-25, I think that's just called the death trap generally, but when we enter I-25, we're focused. I mean, who are we thinking about besides ourselves? Who can we help? And so thinking about security in terms of the individual centric, but looking at how do I make my family safe and secure across the board. I'm not talking about a shotgun on the porch. I mean, talking about financial, emotional, physical well-being, health, et cetera. And then expanding on to your neighborhood, to your broader community, engaging. And there are lots of ways to do that, whether it's, community sports activities, or it's marches, and it's a popular marching season here out in town, and just engaging and being part of the community. So,
yeah, absolutely. So to me, it really sounds a lot like this, kind of human-centered approach to security, being about kind of your whole being, whole presence, and then also the network of our actual community fabric, which I sort of read and hear and think a lot about how we're becoming more and more, isolated, especially with the rise of a lot of technology. It's like, I don't really have to go outside to engage with people. But it kind of sounds like a big piece of maybe feeling more secure as a human is getting back out into the community, saying hi to your neighbors, finding kind of that like event or group that you could be a part of for sense of belonging.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely essential. We connect on our devices, right? We get that, right? And there is some engagement there that's, but the eye contact, the warmth of sitting across from a human, having a conversation, and oftentimes it doesn't have to be somebody you agree with. And I think we all appreciate that this is the most, in our lifetimes, including mine at this age, right? This is one of the more chaotic, seemingly divisive times in history. It's not the only time in history the United States has been through that, or other countries have been through it, but it's particularly challenging right now. And so it's essentially more important, I think, in terms of your security as an individual and your families, et cetera, your community, to engage and not be afraid to engage. And that's hard, right? Because I have 3 daughters that have gone through this, from right now 26 to 36, and they grew up in the generation of social media really taking hold, and it's attractive. I'm on my device hours a day, right, for work ostensibly, but also just for to kind of clear my head from work. But having that human contact, it seems to me absolutely essential. So I know that takes it well beyond human security. And this gets in the realm of human resilience and how we, sustain ourselves, but they're allied. And so I think it's worth thinking about the security of the community. And again, these are tough times. And we have, on a daily basis, we're worried about cyber security, right? Is somebody going to hack into my phone or my bank account? We're worried about kind of political insecurity right now. We're worried about conflict overseas coming to the United States. The trick is not to let the anxiety stop us from engaging. When I first started teaching in Homeland Security, my pitch was, you don't have to be a hero to, what you need not do is be a victim that the fire department doesn't have to rescue you, but rather you can be somebody that's helping somebody else, or at least don't be the victim that goes in lockdown mentally. So think of security in terms of, I know the world is tough, but I'm ready for it. So, and then it's about how to get ready for it. So,
yeah, absolutely. So when you are in your classrooms and you're teaching kind of our students, I'm just curious to know, how do our students kind of respond to some of these concepts, whether it's, taking this more human security approach compared to the sort of traditional Homeland Security that you mentioned, or some of like the skills that we've kind of been playing around with of how to connect with people. What's your classroom like? What do the students seem to think of these sort of concepts?
Yeah. So first, I think they're baffled, right? Yeah. Because they think security. I'm going to, it's about guards and gates and guns and right. Right. And so the notion of human security being much broader in that context, right? To think of all the aspects we've mentioned already is what makes you feel secure and actually be secure. Right? And so I spend a lot of time in the classroom talking to the students about step outside where you are right now in your world, your very busy world as a student at UCCS. Step outside that. And so we do, have a lot of readings, a lot of examples, and I like to use my background as well and my experiences outside the United States to suggest, think about it from that perspective, right? So if you're most recently I've been doing some work in Africa, and so be in Ghana. So when you're in Ghana, how do you see the world? What are your primary concerns there, and how do you think about your security, your family security, community, et cetera, security, and then transport that back. What lessons did you learn from engaging in that angle? What conversations might you have about it? And so then we also spent a fair amount of time just in this notion of critical analysis. There's a lot of talk about critical thinking, and that's important. But first, to get to be a critical thinker, you have to analyze and get those steps in. And so we kind of walk through, how do we understand our own bias? And bias is not just, it's not, we tend to think of bias as, racism or misogyny or what, right? But bias is our experience. It's my collective experience, what I grew up with, the loving parents I had, or the not, the situations I grew up with in school and work and play. So how do we understand our bias? And then how do we, can't get rid of them, right? But how do we work through that to actually analyze a problem, again, in a slightly different way, right? To have a construct that will help us see through a problem. So again, lots of political disagreement right now. So how do you think about that disagreement in a way that where you might be able to engage in a conversation in a meaningful way? You may not be able to change anybody's mind, and frankly, I'm not sure that's even possible, but rather, how do you express yourself clearly without being so emotional that you turn off the person you're talking to, right? And so that type of critical analysis is a big part of it. And then a lot of group work, and not, group work tends to be painful for students. I think most students would agree that that's a horrible part. Please, professor, don't assign any more group work. But the notion behind it is that's the working world. That's how we actually solve problems. And it gets back to that point of look somebody in the eye when you're doing this, right? Talk to a group member, work through that problem together, be comfortable and confident in who you are, learn to express yourself. One of the interesting points in some of the work I've done is I've hosted events where we looked at private sector, government sector. You're hiring people. What are you looking for in the security world? Do you need cybersecurity skills? You need it? No, I need people that can write well, speak well, sell me their ideas, right? So that notion of, I will train you to do anything specific that I need in my world, but if you don't start with that basis, you're going to be a tough one to work with. So write well, speak well, sell your ideas, and then it's walking and chewing bubble gum at the same time, and So,
Love that. Well, as a former technical communication writing professor, of course, I love anytime I can get some backup. I'm like, no, being able to write and articulate yourself. Good starting spot.
Good.
But no, it really, clearly you're teaching some key, just like fundamental, important sort of skills to our students and how to just navigate kind of the world on campus, beyond campus, their careers, and as also in their civic life, I think. Are there opportunities for kind of all majors on campus to take any more like gen ed kind of oriented classes in your area, or are they mainly more specialized to a certain major or minor program?
So they're one class, the Introduction to Human Security, is open across campus, right?
Nice.
So that's
All right.
that's
Sign
part of
up
the
for that one.
Compass curriculum. So we score.
Okay.
The emergency management courses I take are part of the criminal justice program, but they're emergency management. So how do we think about, flooding, fires, things that will impact our community? What are the structures around it that can help in that space? And how do we think about emerging challenges in that emergency, the hazard space? Right? And then at the graduate level, those are the undergraduate courses. And in the graduate level, it's mostly more emerging threats is the class I had this past fall. So talking about technology aspects, but also emerging threats in terms of who is interested in being threatening. So is it drug cartels? Is it human traffickers? Is it a peer adversary, a nation state? And how do we think about that? So again, I encourage anybody across campus, because the courses are fun, right? Because we explore the ideas. At the undergraduate and graduate level, these are not textbook heavy, but rather let's talk about it and work through, because here we're really growing leaders across the field, right? So it's everybody come take these classes, right? They're fun. I enjoy teaching. I love it. I love engaging across, and I think students tend to like being treated like adults in the classroom too. So.
Yeah, I think that they appreciate that as well. And when we give them that space, at least in my classes, I was always like not surprised in terms of, oh, I can't believe this, but more pleasantly inspired by what, the students would bring up in conversation when kind of given that space and kind of distinction and trust of, you have real thoughts and we can have a really good conversation about this.
If I may follow up on that, I mean, that it gets back to the previous point too, but finding your voice. Yeah. I talk to students too about find your voice here with me versus with when you graduate or, et cetera, right? So find it here, explore it, challenge yourself, as uncomfortable as that is to do something in front of a classmate, a peer, but to find your voice here and make some mistakes here in a safe, really a safe intellectual environment to do so.
Absolutely. All right, so you have been right around our campus, our community for quite a while at this point. What is your favorite thing about UCCS? I'm only part-time here, as I'm part-time running the Center for Human Security and teaching. So I have a lot of engagement with the universities around the country. As part of my other job is I run a partnership program for the U.S. government to work with academic institutions. And UCCS is my favorite campus. I mean, truly, right? It's not, it is a collegial. It's let's roll up our sleeves and get things done. It has an adult atmosphere to it that a lot of other campuses do not have. And so when I travel around the country, I work with universities. I enjoy them too, but this really feels like, it's a home to come to. And one of the 3 daughters graduated from UCCS, so I'm pretty happy about that too. Yes, go Mountain Lions. So since you are so well-traveled and you've seen so many different, not only campuses, but also other countries, is there a place or what maybe travel experience that you've had that actually helped you or made you confront maybe a new bias or change of perspective after like kind of visiting and seeing that area?
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. My sense is not a single country, but what I find is in almost every country I go outside the United States, they are willing to challenge me, right? So they're willing to ask me questions about, why is the U.S. doing that? Why are you doing that, right? And so I first confronted this, my first experience, I lived in Switzerland after graduate school. And, the questions they came up with were fantastic. So it really made me explore who I am by, oh my goodness, why am I doing that? Why do I like country music? And now it's the same, again, I mentioned working more in Africa. So that's the west coast of Africa, east coast and the Indian Ocean, a lot of work with Europe and European countries, the Balkans. And it's very similar, is they're comfortable challenging the U.S. In terms of, why are you doing that?
I mean, traveling is one of the fastest, I think, best ways to broaden your perspective and kind of check ourselves as well. It's just experiencing a new place, new area. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, back to kind of our campus, our community. What would you like to see or encourage us to evolve or continue to maybe develop on our campus that you think would be useful, innovative, amazing, that we should put some effort into?
Great. Thanks, Hayley. I like that question because now I get to make another plug. What's hard to do on campus is to bring different parts of the campus together in terms of, I'm teaching human security. Shouldn't I be doing more with the anthropology department, right? Shouldn't I be doing more with Gretchen in cybersecurity, right? So it's hard to bring those together often in terms of the classroom, in terms of integrated programs. So I think a natural evolution for higher ed, and higher ed's going through some very challenging times, right? There's the enrollment cliff. We know funding's a challenge. It's going to be a challenge. That issue is not going away. But it seems to me as a student, what I'd like to see more of is integrated programs. So the Bachelor of Innovation, I was there at the kind of the creation of that. That is a perfect way to approach, I think, bringing people with different ways of thinking of problems. So I'm going to talk about Homeland Security for just a second here. And I know the audience is going, Homeland Security, please don't, especially right now with, if they stood in an airport line for 4.5 hours in Houston, they would appreciate this. When we were looking for those that perpetrated 9/11, right? The idea was we have all these bright minds in the security part of government that couldn't do it. So one of the ways to think about it was bring in insurance executives, bring in doctors, bring in lawyers, bring in engineers, because they approach problem solving differently, right? And that way of thinking about problem solving differently, it just kind of helps us understand, again, that bias, that wall I've got. I mean, I grew up thinking, this way. Somebody penetrate that wall for me, break in and help me think a little bit differently. So I that's a fairly negative example, but I think across the board, the more we can integrate different approaches, different cultural backgrounds, cultural academic backgrounds as well is important.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, one of our sort of driving missions in C3 Innovation is bringing together these cohorts from all these different disciplines, our faculty fellows. We were able to get a great inaugural pool from every college. And already when I see them, interact at workshops, I see that happening where some of the philosophers will bring up something to the engineering kind of professors and vice versa. And everybody definitely is helping each other push their boundaries. And as we put together the student fellowship, that's another key kind of thing we're trying to make sure we have a good breadth sort of student projects and majors, because I agree, interdisciplinary work is important for our campus. Yeah.
I think I'm going to make a plug for
Please do.
one more faculty member. I've already mentioned Gretchen Bliss. She's a superstar. Chip Benight, another superstar that I've worked in for my Homeland Security time here as well. And then Colin McAllister. So, truly, there's much more innovation going on campus, much more creative energy. I know that. But the three that I know and work closely with, they're just amazing. And they do so much for the campus. So shout out to those three wonderful colleagues here on campus.
Love that. Oh, as we wrap up, anything else that you would like to plug or say?
One of the strengths of UCCS is it feels like a hometown university, right? And so I think the idea of doing more in the community, a lot of our students are working in the community, but engaging in some of the the more stimulating might be too strong a term, but ways to engage outside of work and school, right? Whether you're faculty, your staff, you're a student. I mentioned the World Affairs Council, but there are forums like that in town where, it's just fun to engage with people. And again, it gets us out of our devices, gets us out of the classroom for a little bit. And so I'd encourage that at every opportunity. And if you need ideas, again, I'm the good idea fairy. Come to the Center for Human Security. I can fill your head with all kinds of fairy dust. So
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me,
welcome.
Steve. I really enjoyed and learned a lot about human security that I definitely did not know, had not thought about too much before. So I appreciate you sharing the idea dust with us today.
Thanks, Hayley. Thanks for inviting me on.
And that's today's journey into innovation. Now, when to explore the research and ideas we mentioned today, everything is linked in the show notes. If you want to be a guest, I'd love to hear your story. Find the submission form at our website, c3innovation.uccs.edu. Innovation Springs is a production of C3 Innovation at the UCCS Kramer Family Library. Studio recording is provided by the Garage at EPIIC. Hayley Blackburn is an affiliate faculty member in the Digital Humanities Center. Theme music is from Simon Drumpf-Lippine, Dreaming of Innovation, Storyblocks. Follow at c3innovation.uccs on social media and check out our website for events, programs, and more opportunities. For more content on the digital humanities, head over to labs.uccs.edu/CREFDH. And for more innovation initiatives, go over to EPIIC.uccs.edu with our friends in EPIIC. See you next episode.